The sun is to position itself to shine brightest at the middle of the day. That is the case of the period of youth. The significance of the morning undoubtedly lies in the development of the individual, our entrenchment in the outer world, the propagation of our kind, and the care of our children. Old age, however, seems opposite to all previous stages in that the process of development ceases and our energy diminishes. If old age is not about continuing the process of development triggered since childhood, then what is its purpose? So obvious it's a period of decadence, weakness of the mind and slowness of the body, but there must be a significance behind it. Let's find out. We'll start with a neat description of the psychic features as always, and in the process we will eventually arrive to deduce a plausible meaning for this phase. In observing statistics, Jung had recognized a pattern, an increase in depressive episodes in people between 35 and 40. These frequent depressions, he said, signal a significant change in the human psyche. Something is happening in the unconscious, a preparation of some sort, a transition to the final stage of life. Some changes in character start to surface incrementally. What is notable is how convictions the person has a thorough embodied strengthen. He grows further intolerant to change, especially in regards to moral principles, and a stage of fanaticism is to be expected at the age of 50. As I said in my previous video, for this to be fairly prevented, try to cultivate and maintain a flexible mentality in your 20s that will eventually carry on in late life. It also frequently happens that the convictions and principles which have hitherto been accepted, especially the moral principles, commence to harden and grow increasingly rigid until, somewhere towards the age of 50, a period of intolerance and fanaticism is reached. It is then as if the existence of these principles were endangered, and it were therefore necessary to emphasize them all the more. In addition, we could notice some transformations on a hormonal level. Both sexes exploit to the fullest their share of masculine and feminine energies in the period of youth. However, in late life, we may often observe that these roles are flipped upside down. The feminine in men permeates itself, while the masculine becomes dominant in women. This change is rather invisible as it occurs more so on a psychic plane, despite that in some races elderly females develop mustaches and deep voices, while the vigor of the male was toned down by feminine traits. How often it happens that a man of 40 or 50 years winds up his business and that his wife then dons the trousers and opens a little shop where he sometimes performs the duties of handyman. There are many women who only awake to social responsibility and social consciousness after their 40th year. In modern business life, especially in the United States, nervous breakdown in the 40s or after is a very common occurrence. If one studies the victims a little closely, one sees that the thing which has broken down is the masculine style of life which held the field up to now. What is left over is an effeminate man. Contrariwise, one can observe women in these selfsame business spheres who have developed in the second half of life an uncommon masculinity and an incisiveness which push the feelings and the heart aside. Very often the reversal is accompanied by all sorts of catastrophes in marriage, for it is not hard to imagine what may happen when the husband discovers his tender feelings and the wife her sharpness of mind. It is the norm on the markets, products that promote youthfulness and beauty. Old age is frowned upon nowadays as though it had no purpose but repulsiveness and inefficiency. Quite often the mother competes in looks and fashion with her daughter. The father tries to model his son. In spite of the fact of how vital it is to surround oneself with youngsters to ward off rigidity, old age is not only about modeling the young. Now, a thing to keep in mind, the author was certain of some concepts, but on others he's offering mere speculation. So here I cannot say for sure what this period is about, but let's just say what he said for the sake of speculation. What Jung was fairly sure of is that old age is about rest and restoration. For a young person, it is almost a sin and certainly a danger to be too much occupied with oneself. But for the aging person, it is a duty and a necessity to give serious attention to himself. After having lavished its light upon the world, the sun withdraws its rays in order to illumine itself. Aside from this, he further speculated that old age could also be about culture, meaning the person now has more time to retire in the reading of books, the teaching of offsprings, and the sharing of wisdom. In primitive tribes, we observe that old people are almost always the guardians of mysteries and the laws, and it is in these that the cultural heritage of the tribe is expressed. How does the matter stand with us? Where's the wisdom of our old people? Where are their precious secrets and their visions? For the most part, our old people try to compete with the young. The author spoke of a spooky phenomenon of high probability. He said it is possible for the personality to deconstruct and undergo a thorough change in late life, leaving the person you had long known a total stranger. Particularly happens when someone enters old age with fanatic rigidity in habits and ideals that served him in his youth period. In other words, he enters late life with solidified convictions and with a firm assumption that he will remain the same person no matter what. This example by the author puts it perfectly. I know of a pious man who was a church warden and who, from the age of 40 onwards, showed a growing and finally unbearable intolerance in things of morality and religion. At the same time, his disposition grew visibly worse. At last, he was nothing more than a darkly quote-unquote pillar of the church. In this way, he got along until his 55th year when suddenly, one night, sitting up in bed, he said to his wife, "Now at last I've got it. As a matter of fact, I'm just a plain rascal." Nor did this realization remain without results. He spent his declining years in riotous living and in wasting a goodly part of his fortune. Obviously, quite a likable person, capable of both extremes. It's as though what he had hitherto repressed and rejected now came rushing to the conscious surface as a violent change in character. A similar case are people who enter late life with that work hard, forceful hustling mentality. They constrain themselves to work long hours assuming they still have that youthful energy, which engenders health issues. Or elders who hate the wrinkles, reject their current reality, and speak often of the old good days of youth. This habit in particular results in stress and weird character disorders according to Jung. In brief, most of these conditions and the psychic disturbances of late life are caused by the mere assumption that the personality will remain the same in this last period as in his 20s. The significance of the morning undoubtedly lies in the development of the individual, our entrenchment in the outer world, the propagation of our kind, and the care of our children. This is the obvious purpose of nature. But when this purpose has been attained, and even more than attained, shall the earning of money, the extension of conquest, and the expansion of life go steadily on beyond the bounds of all reason and sense? Whoever carries over into the afternoon the laws of the morning, that is, the aims of nature, must pay for so doing with the damage to his soul just as surely as a growing youth who tries to salvage his childish egoism must pay for this mistake with social failure. Jung observed that many resist the approaching of old age. Some people call this phenomenon midlife crisis. And even as elders, they despise their current state and keep on speaking of their youthful conquests and doings. Those are who resent the young for their pleasures and vigor. Many old people prefer to be hypochondriacs, niggards, doctrinaires, applauders of the past, or eternal adolescents. All lamentable substitutes for the illumination of the self, but inevitable consequences of the delusion that the second half of life must be governed by the principles of the first. In a nutshell, to prevent any psychic disorder in late life, one must welcome old age with open arms, support, try to learn from, and surround oneself with, instead of resent the young. Further, it's vital to acknowledge that now is the time to rest and take care of oneself, especially in extreme old age. Do not be fooled into carrying the idea that you're gonna maintain the same energy levels of youth as an old man. This can mean that the youth period is your only chance to build oneself and one's empire, health, wealth, and good relationships, for you won't be that motivated to do so in your 50s. As I've mentioned, every psychological period has a specific purpose. If the habits of youth, for instance, succeed to late life, expect disorders of the mind and body. Same goes for youth. If you're stagnating like an old man in your 20s, expect some weird behavioral changes to ensue. All these changes happen spontaneously on a psychic, invisible level. The purpose of the series of videos was to bring them to light, awaken you to the fact that every phase of life is different, and that if you happen to live one or each of them in the wrong way, the next phase will be strenuous and perhaps would bring about psychological issues. Learn how to live every stage well. Basic gist: exploit your potential to the fullest in your 20s and early 30s so to stabilize your psychology in your 40s and 50s. It is a grand pleasure to have worked on this series on psychic life, and I hope all the joy was yours watching it. You can click on this playlist on the video now to watch it all over again, or if you've missed out on some episodes. I wish to thank you all for supporting the journey with your comments, likes and subscriptions. I really appreciate it. It really means a lot. The best is yet to come. Talk to you soon. Thoroughly unprepared, we take the step into the afternoon of life. Worse still, we take this step with the false presupposition that our truths and ideals will serve us as a thorough. But we cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of life's morning, for what was great in the morning will be little at evening, and what in the morning was true will at evening have become a lie.